Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about my personal experience with research, just to show you some of the stuff that's out there. So one of the first labs that I worked in during in college was an organic chemistry lab, and their focus was studying protein detection groups. So what is a protein detection group? It is a group that helps you identify a protein in the hundreds, thousands of proteins that are in a single cell. So let's say that we wanted to create the protein insulin. Insulin's a protein, polypeptide protein that helps make it to where sugar comes into the cells, right? Well, if you can actually infect bacteria with the gene that'll create insulin so that you can have medically available insulin for sale on the market, right? That's one way to do it, is to get bacteria to create this protein so that you can sell it. One of the problems is, though, you have to detect that it's actually the molecule or the protein of interest. One of the ways they do this is putting tags on them, and this is what I mean by a detection group, is a tag. How can you identify it and the mess of molecules and proteins that are in a single cell? So the one that we were working on was a fluorescent one. So they definitely knew what it was and that it would fluorescent if you put it under UV light, right? The problem with adding a group to any molecule or protein is that it changes the structure a little bit. So if we look down here, this is the structure of a random protein that I found online. Um, and what we see here is that a protein is a long molecule, right? And it's folded up in a certain way. So here, up here, we see some alpha helices. And then over here, there's some beta pleated sheets. And it's just the way that the amino acids are arranged. So there's 20 different amino acids and they make up the proteins. And so if you add what we were looking at is called N-tert-butyl, and so it has a weird structure with some nitrogen, some carbon, and some hydrogen. Okay, that's all I'm going to share with you guys. It's pretty complicated. So if you added that nitrogen group right here, it doesn't look like it's going to affect anything around it, so that's a pretty good place to put it. But then you just have to know what you're going to attach it to, how to attach it, and how things are going to shift. So that's what we were looking into in that research lab. Most of my time spent my time studying the molecules and separating them from other molecules. It was tiring or pretty boring work actually, and just stand in between it in front of the HPL machine, LC machine, and what it does is basically it takes the molecules, it arsonizes them or turns them into a gas, and then they get dissolved again in a solvent, and then they drip down into a bunch of different test tubes, and then you can take those to a machine that'll tell you what is inside of it, what's making up that solution there. So you can, it's fraction, uh, forget it. It's fractional. It's meaning that it takes it into separates it into different tubes with a bunch of different solvent in it. So that's one of them. That was my experience with the natural science. The one, and I did that for a semester. Another one that I've done for over 2 years now, and worked a lot of hours with, like over 700, 800. I was thinking about it today, as a project called Project Seed. So what Project Seed is a study that investigates the effects of interpreting slash translating in Mexican American children's social, emotional, and educational development. So this one is done by a psychology PhD person, and and that's what she does is what I said there. And it's in the human development and family sciences. So it's kind of like a society or sociology study, but it's more of a focus on the family and stuff. So to be in this study, as it says, you have to be a Mexican American, you have to interpret for your parents, and your parents have to be from Mexico. The child doesn't necessarily have to be from Mexico. That's the criteria for being in the study. And so what we want to see, right, is how interpreting affects them socially, emotionally, educationally, and then their development in general, just like health and cognitive functioning. So it's easy to say that, and it's a whole nother thing to be able to prove what does what, how it affects it, and to what extent does it affect it. So we can go around asking people, right, what do you think? How does translating positively, negatively affect you? And they'll give you answers, right? That's not really a good scientific study because you're not looking at the certain factors and how they correspond with everything else. You're probably going to be hard pressed to find someone that'll tell you that it's bad to be translating and stuff. And sometimes it can be stressful. So the data we collect, so the vocabulary test was the first one on this list. The vocabulary test is really just a cognitive functioning test to see what their development is. So these kids are teenagers now, a lot of them going into college, so we want to see how advanced is their vocabulary. And then we do saliva samples during the stressor. So this is the visit I kind of enjoy. We go and we're dressed up. There's 3 RAs or research assistants. We're dressed up in lab coats. We go and we stress the kids out by showing up in our lab coats. It's looks very official. And we walk in there. We tell the kid that he or she's going to interpret a medical document for us that's just full of medical jargon, very hard for a medical professional or only medical professionals would really understand it, and then it's a whole other thing to translate it. So they're going to do that for us in front of their parents, and we also tell them that we're going to take video, audio, and we're going to take notes of what they translate correctly and incorrectly. So they do that for 10 minutes, and we're stressing them out, right? This is a stressor. We collect saliva samples to measure the response, right? So that's what do we look at in the saliva is cortisol, cortisone, DHEA, and testosterone. These are all believed to be stress-related hormones, which we know cortisol, cortisone are. Testosterone gives you confidence in tough situations. And then, so we want to see if testosterone is also released in the body while you're translating. It's kind of a newer stress-related molecule that we're seeing if it's actually released or not. And then there's DHEA, which is some weird chemical that also helps give you confidence in stressful situations. And then, so we do the saliva samples. There's 7 different samples we take at different times to see, first of all, how stressed are they when we get there, how stressed are they after the task of translating, and then the recovery. So after they do the task of translating for 10 minutes, most of the time they just stand up there and can't do very much because it's so hard. We tell them afterwards that it's a joke, that we don't really care, the video camera's off and stuff like that. So we see how they recover and stuff. And then we also do hair samples with the same hormones, but this will tell us how much stress they've been experiencing in the last 3 to 6 months, whereas the saliva samples will give us the stress they were experiencing 10 minutes ago. Then we also do at-home saliva collection because we need to be able to compare the saliva samples of the stressor to a normal daily value of stress to see the difference between their normal and then a stressful situation, right? To see how stressed out they are. And then we do health measurements, just height, weight, waist circumference to see how they're developing and see if this is related to translating in a positive or negative way. And then we do computer task activities. It's just really cognitive functioning tests to see how well they make decisions and how their memory. We also do a dry blood sample with the child to look at some more stress-related hormones like glycosylated hemoglobin, the length of the telomeres, and other things. We also do a survey to see how they feel about being in the USA and about their family situation and school situation and what they want from the kid. Are the parents close to the kid? Are they not? How does this all play into interpreting and the effects of it? And then we can, so all these responses or the data that we collect are all numerical values that we can compare with each other. So it's not open-ended questions. It's not qualitative. So the research methods here, we're going to go over this because it's important to be able to do experiments. Quantitative data is data with numerical value, and so we can compare it or do in a great way because we have definite finite numbers that we can compare. Qualitative is more of a comparison using descriptions, so more like words and stuff. So if you wanted to compare stories of Vietnam veterans, then you would be doing a qualitative data collection, right? Or qualitative experiment or survey because you're listening to their story. We're more of a quantitative when Project Seed because we were all the responses they were putting down on a multiple choice response so that after we can kind of classify those and go ahead and compare those. So for research methods, there's a lot of different ways and there's a lot of different sciences that we've looked at, right? So one of the ways is a survey, and surveys has its up and downs with all scientific research studies. One of the problems with surveys, it's based on a lot of times self-report, which is always valuable because of memory and stuff. But it's a great way to get to know people a little bit and have them recall information from a short that happened recently in the past. If you're going to do a laboratory experiment, it usually requires a bit more money. It doesn't have to. You can do simple experiments to explore some phenomenon, but they get quite complex in the scientific world. There's has up and downs too of doing those. You always have to control for environmental factors, which can get in the way sometimes because sometimes we don't know what's in the air and stuff. And then observational studies is like you go out into the wilderness and you just study the eating patterns of antelopes. So you just kind of follow them and write down what you see And then there's another way of doing research, and this one is kind of copycatting, I would call it. You take what is known in the literature and then you take what else is known in the literature and you kind of mash it up to look at a different thing. So let's say that we had the data of heights in the USA, and then we have the data of weights in the USA, and we take those two and we add them together to make the BMI. So they weren't previously together, but now they are because you're doing the BMI, which is the body mass index, right? We've been talking about it for a while now. So you're adding those two together. That's definitely a way that you can do it. You can take other research that people have done and add them together. You just have to ask for permissions and go through all the legal motions and stuff. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to have y'all fill out the Google Forms. It's questions over class. Did you learn something? Were you paying attention? And then we're going to come back and create our own study here. We're going to have that in the homework. So go ahead and pause this and it'll be in the email, the Google Forms. Fill those out, one per person, and I'll check those later. And then we're going to come back here and create a survey. Just real quick. Alrighty.